Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, please subscribe. I'd really love that. If you're returning, how you doing? What we're going to be talking about right now is the JFK file release. And I'm going to go into some detail, okay, about what I read. And I did not read all of them because there's like 80,000 pages and it is virtually impossible to read all of that, okay, in one day. So I did go through about 500 pages. Okay, so I'm going to give you like a summary. Okay, and this, what happened, okay, JFK, the files, it was released on March 18th. Like I said, it was about 80,000 pages. Um, to me, it didn't seem to deliver like a single like knockout punch to rewrite history. But they do offer some intriguing tidbits that might keep you up at night pondering. Okay. Like I said, I didn't read all of it, but I did do a lot of research and I was asking other people what they thought and, putting minds together, that type of thing. But based on what has been sifted through so far, here are the juiciest parts that stand out. Okay. Oswald's KGB contact in Mexico City. One of the standout details is a memo from November 23rd, 1963, noting an intercepted phone call where Lee Harvey Oswald spoke with a KGB officer at the Soviet embassy in Mexico City in September 1963, just weeks before the event. Okay. Now, this fuels speculation about the Soviet ties or a possible Castro revenge plot, given Oswald's pro Cuba leanings. Now, like I said, not a smoking gun, but it's the kind of detail that makes you wonder what else was brewing behind the Iron Curtain. Now, we're going to talk about the CIA's knowledge of Oswald. Okay, the files reveal that the CIA was tracking Oswald more closely than previously admitted, with cables and memos and detailing his visits to the Soviet to Cuban embassies in Mexico. There's a hint of frustration that this info wasn't fully shared with the FBI, raising questions about whether it was bureaucratic bungling or something more deliberate. Could the CIA have dropped the ball or held it back? Hmm, you know. Uh, so Jack Ruby, the guy who took Oswald's life, okay, and his shady connections. While this is not entirely new, okay, the files flesh out Jack Ruby's murky world. And there's mention of his ties to organized crime, including running numbers for Al Capone in the 1930s and later gun running in Cuba. A day before the event, he reportedly met with oil tycoon H.L. Hunt and E.H. Branding in the Dallas, Texas, or Dow Tex, okay, building near Dealey Plaza. Is this a coincidence? Maybe. But it's juicy enough to stir the conspiracy pot. Okay, I'll give you that. Now, we talk about the second shooter on the grassy knoll, okay, some documents tease this possibility of a second gunman with witness Julia Ann Mercer's account. Uh, and this is from earlier releases that are being echoed here, but she claimed that she saw Ruby dropping off a man with a rifle near the grassy knoll. Okay, she alleged that the FBI twisted her statement, which adds a layer of distrust to the official story. It's not conclusive, but it's the kind of detail that keeps the, well, who else was there debate alive, right? So now, what about the eerie phone call after Oswald's demise? Okay, an odd nugget is an FBI memo about a call that was received after Ruby took Oswald's life. And it was a warning of his impending demise before it even happened. And it's cryptic and doesn't upend the lone gunman theory, but it's spooky enough to make you question how tight the information loop really was. But these tidbits, they don't like dismantle the Warren Commission's conclusion that Oswald acted alone. But they do sprinkle just enough spice to keep the skeptics and the amateur sleuths digging around about, okay? Historians are saying that it'll take months to fully unpack the 6 million plus pages that are now public. So the juiciest revelations might still be buried, okay? But for now, these are the tastiest morsels to chew on, whether they're red herrings or hidden truths, which is still up for grabs. So what do you think? Is it enough to rewrite history, or is it just more shadows to chase? The claim about someone predicting Oswald's death after the assassination, because I kept seeing that. The files do mention an eerie FBI memo. It was November 24th, 1963. It was written hours after Jack Ruby took Oswald's life. It notes, like I said, a call to the FBI in the Dallas office from a man claiming to represent a committee that was formed to take Oswald's life, and it was received before Ruby pulled the trigger. And this suggests someone knew Oswald's fate was sealed, but it's very vague. There's no names, no specifics on who this committee was. Just like a chilling, like, heads up, J. Edgar Hoover himself fumed in the memo that the FBI had warned Dallas police of threats for Oswald's life, and yet they botched the protection. And does this, prove conspiracy? Not quite, but it's more of a red flag of chaos and poor coordination than a clear prophecy. Some online chatter, like a post from the Patriot Oasis on Twitter, hypes this as evidence of foreknowledge, even tying it to a mysterious Sergey, whatever how you pronounce it, predicting both Oswald's and MLK's demise. But the files don't name anyone named Sergey, whatever, and MLK's assassination in 1968. It's not even linked. That sounds like speculation stretching beyond the documents. And see, that's the bad thing about this. People are going to make assumptions, and they're going to dig, and they're going to make something out of nothing. Okay, not saying that this event was nothing, but they're trying to make it. They're making more out of what is actually there. So these 80,000 pages are a slow burn. Okay, not a fireworks show, but there are a few more morsels that might pique your interest beyond what I have already covered for you. The CIA's lone nut push. There's a memo from 1967 where the CIA instructs the media contacts to emphasize the lone nut theory and discredit conspiracy talk. And it's not new that the CIA wanted to shape the narrative, but seeing it spelled out complete with a list of talking points feels like a peek behind the curtain. And some social media platforms and users, content creators, whatever, are calling it proof of a cover-up, and though it could just be damage control after the Warren report took heat. But let's talk about the Cuban exile chatter, okay? The files dig deeper into the Cuban angle with reports of anti-Castro exiles in Miami bragging about knowing the hit was coming. One document cites a source claiming a group of Alpha 66 had plans in motion around Dallas in 1963. It's hearsay. There's no like hard evidence, nothing black and white, that type of thing, but it's the kind of whisper that keeps the revenge for the Bay of Pigs theory simmering. Okay. Now the mystery man in Dealey Plaza. A lesser known gem is a Dallas police report mentioning a guy in a suit with Secret Service credentials who vanished after the event. And witnesses saw him near the grassy knoll, but the Secret Service later said that none of their agents were on foot there. And an imposter or sloppy record keeping, okay, it's a loose end that got people on social media speculating about rogue operatives. Now, when it comes to Lyndon B. Johnson and the doubts there's a transcript from 1966 and a phone call where LBJ, who was then got sworn in, he was president then, privately tells an aide that he's never fully bought the lone gunman story. He muses about the international connections, but he doesn't elaborate. It's not a bombshell by any means, but LBJ's skepticism has been rumored before, but hearing it from his mouth adds a layer of intrigue about what the higher-ups really thought. Now, these nuggets, like I said, they're not going to rewrite the case. They're not going to rewrite history, but they're juicy in how they tease alternative threads. Misdirection, foreign ties, just plain weirdness. The catch is, with over 6 million pages now public, it's being said that the real jaw droppers might still be hiding in the pile, waiting for someone to connect the dots. For now, it's less about definitive answers and more about tantalizing the what ifs, okay? Now, I have said before, and a lot of people agree with me about Oswald as being the patsy. It's been a hot theory, not just because he shouted it to himself, to reporters, "I'm just a patsy," right before Ruby silenced him, okay? The files doesn't hand you a signed confession proving it, but it does toss fuel onto the fire, okay? Now, for shiznits and giggles, let's chew on how these new tidbits might back up this patsy hunch, okay? Or at least to keep it in play, if you will. The Mexico City stuff is a big one, okay? Oswald's meeting with the Soviet and the Cuban embassy folks in September of 1963. It was tracked by the CIA, paint him as a guy in over his head. If he was a lone nut, why is he pinging Cold War radar so hard? Huh? The files show the CIA knew that he talked to a KGB officer tied to assassinations. Yet they didn't flag him as a major threat to the FBI. That could scream incompetence or suggest someone wanted him loose, a perfect fall guy for a bigger plot. Pair that with his pro-Castro leaflets in New Orleans and his oddball defection to the USSR. Well, that's what Russia was known as the USSR, okay, back 1959. And then he starts looking like a scripted pawn and not the mastermind here, okay? Now, then there's the timing and the chaos around his demise. That FBI memo about the committee, the call before Ruby shot him, sketchy as it is, hints someone needed Oswald out of the picture fast before he could spill anything. Ruby's mob ties and the weird meetup with the oil barons, and then the day before the event, it doesn't help. It's easy to imagine him as the cleanup crew, not a random avenger. If Oswald was set up, silencing him would have been step one. Now, the Grassy knoll whispers and the fake Secret Service guy in the new files add to the patsy vibe. If there was another shooter or a shadow team, Oswald's rifle and perch in the book depository couldn't have been the distraction, allowed sloppy decoy to pin it on, LBJ's own doubts about the lone gunman story, even if vague, suggests the official line felt shaky to insiders. But on the flip side, the files don't erase the case against him either. His prints are on the rifle, the tip of murder, his sketchy behavior. A patsy doesn't have to be innocent, just manipulated. Okay? Think Project Monarch, the video that I did yesterday. Okay? Maybe he fired shots, but wasn't the brains behind it. Maybe he was framed outright. The CIA's push to sell the lone nut narrative could be them covering their own intel failures, burying something uglier. These files don't prove Oswald was a patsy, but they sure don't kill the idea either. It's like they're daring us to keep asking who picked them and why. What is your take on the strings? They might have been pulled for CIA, mob, Cuba, somewhere else. Okay, but Oswald's military background, his Russian wife Marina, they make him stand out for a perfect candidate to be a patsy. He was a United States Marine. He was trained as a radar operator at places like Atsugi, Atsugi. Can't pronounce it. It's an air base in Japan. It's a CIA hub. Okay? They gave him a skill set that could catch the eye of planners. He wasn't some random grunt. He had access to U-2 spy plane ops and security clearance. When he defected to the USSR in 1959, he claimed he'd spill it all. He got the tea. He was spilling it. It made him a walking red flag, perfect for framing a Soviet stooge. Okay? The new files, they don't deep dive into his Marine Corps days. But they do highlight the CIA cables tracking his Soviet ties post-defection. Like they never quite let him off the leash. If someone wanted a fall guy with a believable commie traitor backstory, his resume just checked the box. Okay, and then Marina, his wife, like I said, Soviet Union, she amped it up with her whatever. Married in 1961, she was a pharmacist's daughter with an uncle in the Soviet Interior Ministry. Nothing screams KGB plant louder than that to a paranoid 1960s spook, okay? The files mention that Oswald's Mexico City trip in 1963, where he pitched Marina's Soviet citizenship to embassy officials, maybe angling for visas. Okay, that could have been his move, or someone else's script to paint him as a Kremlin pawn. Post-assassination, the FBI grilled Marina so hard, and her shaky English, and vague answers fed the narrative of a red-linked couple. If you're setting up a patsy, a Russian wife is a propaganda gold mine. Okay? Especially with the Bay of Pigs. Cuban Missile Crisis still raw in everybody's mind. My theory, clicks with the idea of Oswald as a crafted scapegoat, ex-Marine, gone rogue, married to the enemy, dabbling in Castro's cause. CIA's Mexico City surveillance shows they had him in their sights. Maybe they let him run loose to see where he was going to go. Maybe they nudged him into the position. The files don't say who picked him, but they teased enough loose ends, huh? Like the KGB contact, the FBI pre-Ruby warning, to suggest he was more puppet than mastermind. Mob couldn't exploit his volatility. CIA, his past, intel past, or his Cuba sympathies. I'm telling you. Point blank, period. You want to do your research, you go right ahead. But I told you what was in it. Tidbit, because I ain't reading 80,000 pages. And then I gave you my opinion. Go do your own research. Form your own opinions. Something stinks in suburbia. Just saying. All right. I'm out of here, y'all. I will see you in the next one. Okay? You stay safe. You stay positive. You keep prepping. And as always, fear less. Ciao.